Greetings. Let's check out 24. Early Cold War. There we are, all happy at the end of the war. Well, we really weren't. Cold War. Wow, that's just something that I grew up with. Part of my life. And it's hard to believe that history books will kind of just refer to it as a 75-year period, a brief 75-year period. Well, it dominated my life growing up as a kid. Okay, you meet George Kennan, and he is the father of containment, the label affixed to U.S. foreign policy. You'll notice my quote of the day down there was Kennan's attitude. In my words, his idea: contain it and sit tight. The Russians will mess it up on their own. And that's what happened. In the 1940s and 50s, they certainly didn't know that it would all, come to an end in 1990, but that's what happened. And the Russians ended up messing it up all on their own. Churchill, Prime Minister, Great Britain here, coining the phrase Iron Curtain, and that's my writing down there at the bottom. Not my writing, but addition. And this was perceived as trying to provoke war with this belligerent speech. Labeling it the Iron Curtain. And people were testy. Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan, we put those together because those are the two components of containment. Containment equals Truman Doctrine plus the Marshall Plan. You'll see that here in just a sec. NATO, the post-WW2 military alliance between the U.S. and Western powers. NATO versus Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact being the Russians or the Soviets' military alliance to combat NATO. Got kind of tied up there. Alright, Truman Doctrine. President Truman adding to the foreign policy of the United States, which generally means to add to the Monroe Doctrine. But you'll notice here, Truman Doctrine, if a country is in danger, if free peoples are resisting attempted subjugation, let us know, we'll be there in the morning. Truman Doctrine makes up the military side of containment. We will contain the spread of communism by going and physically containing it if necessary. Now, Marshall Plan, restoring Europeans' faith in capitalism by sending $13 billion overseas to rebuild Europe's ruined roads, bridges, factories, and farms. It's the definition here: restore Europeans' faith in capitalism. It's to make Europeans less vulnerable to the bells and whistles of socialism/communism. If we can eliminate economic disaster in a country, then we can eliminate some of the attractiveness of communism. So That's the idea behind that. There you go. Marshall Plan, dollars, and you'll notice also what we're doing here is showing the difference between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. NATO blue, Warsaw Pact pink or purple, whatever that is. So we see an east-west flavor to it, obviously, and you can now picture Churchill's Iron Curtain. Cool contrasting cartoons. Our version of the Marshall Plan, we're helping Europe lift itself up. Of course, the Soviet version is how we've got European countries bowing down, kissing our feet, all that stuff. Berlin Airlift, one of the greatest feats of guts and in your face that I've ever seen. Resupplying West Berlin with the airlift, so risky, going over the Soviet blockade, and just kind of an in-your-face move. Gotta love that. We can see Berlin in the heart of East Germany. So we got East Germany, West Germany, and of course the Russians tried to block the joining of the British, French, and American zones to make up West Germany, but they were unsuccessful. What political impact does this photo have? Awesome. One of the most famous photographs in the history of your country. This Chicago, the Trib, coming out a little premature. And of course Truman just relishing the moment. So 1949, China becomes communist. Soviet Union is acquiring nuclear weapons. 1950, North Korea invades South Korea to unify Korea. And this becomes the first test of containment. We're getting ready to head over there and put it all on the line there. And we were lucky in that we were able to get UN sanction. This is a UN, United Nations, sanctioned war. The United States led the efforts, but it was a UN sanctioned war. You hear me? UN, United Nations sanctioned war. Now, on the Permanent Security Council, you're getting ready to learn something now, so hang tight. On the Security Council, there's 5 countries that have a permanent veto. And Russia, now Soviet Union, is one of them, and so is China. But United States is another one. Great Britain, France. So China gets expelled or suspended because it has turned communist in 1949. And so because of this change by revolution, the UN has suspended China. The Russians walk out in protest. Korean War breaks out and UN sanctions it without those 2 countries to slap their permanent veto on it. It would have only taken 1 country. But I guess that's a lesson to be learned in letting your temper get the best of you and getting up and storming out of the room. So the UN decides to intervene on behalf of the South Koreans, and 2.5 years later, President Eisenhower negotiates the end of the war, and we keep the two countries split as they are still split today. In a perverse way, we look at this, and you can feel secure that containment was honored here, was defended. There was no spread of communism. Took a lot of lives, and one of my old belly up to the bar buddies was a Korean War veteran, and you better not mention anything about at least we contain the spread of communism. Yeah, he'd kind of lose it on you. But anywho, Korean War. If you had never seen MASH, check it out. MASH. There we go. Heartbreak of war. We like Ike. The fear of nuclear weapons. Huh. I remember watching a Happy Days episode, and Mr. Cunningham, put a fallout shelter in the backyard. Of course, Godzilla was a product of all this nuclear stuff gone awry. Little Japanese contribution to world political statements. There's our fallout shelters. Now, second Red Scare, first Red Scare back after WW1. House Un-American Activities Committee, taken over by the controlled by the Republicans back in the late 30s, and boy, it turned into a serious juggernaut. House Un-American Activities Committee, and the climate was ripe for McCarthyism. Here we are, back to the page here, here we are convicting a former State Department official, Alger Hiss. Couldn't get him on what he was guilty of because the limitation had expired, and the evidence was no good. But we got him for lying, so we got him for something. The statute of limitations had expired on the evidence. And the Rosenbergs, we fried them. Mr. and Mrs. Julius and Ethel. She apparently had connections through a relative and to the Manhattan Project. And we didn't mess around. Burn all reds. Red being the color associated with communism. Now, this House Un-American Activities Committee lets me tell a pretty cool story. Nancy Davis found herself on a blacklist for being a communist sympathizer. She goes to her agent and says, hey, I'm not a communist sympathizer. What's this blacklist action? How come I can't get a job? Blah, blah. She said, well, in order to get off the blacklist, there's really only one guy that can probably help you, and Ronald Reagan, Dutch Reagan. So you need to talk to Dutch Reagan. So she contacts Ronald Reagan. They meet, of course. She convinces him that she's not on the blacklist, and he got her off, and I guess the rest is history. So of course, Nancy Davis becomes Nancy Reagan, and your first lady in the 1980s. So that's how they hooked up. But Ronald Reagan became this extremely influential, kind of a B actor, but became very politically active, and was a huge hunter of communists, but spoke against communism all the time, all the way up until his presidency in 1980, starting in 1981. McCarthyism, remember, is used for any witch hunt, any political witch hunt anymore. It's kind of the term we use for, kind of an allusion for political witch hunts. And Joseph McCarthy was a great American who just kind of got a little bit carried away towards the end here, and might have let Jim Beam do a little bit of his talking. But anyway, he really kind of turned into a nasty character, and it was all on TV. And so he gets discredited and censured by the Senate, which is a Senate reprimand. McCarthyism. I'm gonna tell you what. I guess I can't really argue about Harriet Tubman being on the new $20 bill. There's always kind of rumors going around about that. Eleanor Roosevelt be good for the 20 as well. The most active first lady in the history of your country. I guess because she was the first, you can't say Hillary wasn't active, but okay. Averting nuclear war. Sputnik, the dadgum space race was a Cold War thing. Isn't that crazy? Berlin Wall. There's Sputnik. Berlin Wall gets, hang on. Berlin Wall doesn't go up until the 60s. Kennedy. Khrushchev. Not Stalin. Bay of Pigs, Lord have mercy. Kennedy just took full blame. And then in Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy gets all the credit.